stories for our future, or stories for the future. We think about technology. This is a STEAM conference, and I want to talk about one of the first, I'd say, design tools that was created by humankind, and that's the story. And before we had all this technology, people would share stories to talk about their culture, their beliefs, their collective knowledge. And because we use stories, I think stories are kind of, for me, like the original green sustainable hard drive. It collects everything, and by having stories, we've created history. So when we think about the story, this is a quote by a modern storyteller, an African writer called Adichie. And she says that stories matter. And it's true, stories do matter. Stories matter because they can inspire us to do things we don't think we can do. They can give us courage. They can give us hope for the future. And how we tell stories can positively or negatively affect us. So since we're going down the route of storytelling today, I want to start with one of the more famous storytellers, and that's Aesop. A fable by Aesop. And this is a story about a man on the far left corner, and he goes into a wood, and he has a metal object in his hands. And he begs the trees. He says, "Trees, please, can I have some wood?" And so they talk amongst themselves, and then the large oak, who is kind of the grandfather statesman of the group, says, "Okay, we're going to sacrifice the ash tree. So you can have the ash tree." So he takes the ash tree, and the first thing he does with the ash tree is he forms a handle for his axe. And with the axe, he goes and he chops down all the trees. And as the oak is about to get chopped down, he says to the cedar, if we hadn't sacrificed the ash tree, we would have had possibility of living forever. And so the moral of the story, and Aesop's fables always have morals, is that sometimes when we sacrifice the rights of the weaker ones, in the long run, we're sacrificing our own rights. And it's something I want you to keep in mind as we go through this story and we think about how this applies to STEAM and STEAM education. So this is another quote. This is an African proverb. It says, "If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." So as we go through the story, I want you to keep this in mind. And always we're going to be referring back to this idea about going quickly and going alone, and going slowly, going far and going together. So now we're looking at the stars. And this is going to be a story, an epic human story. Humans have always been explorers. So we've explored the far South Pole, we've explored the far North Poles, we've explored all the oceans in our ships. We've even gone down up every mountain. We've gone down to the depths of the ocean, and we are never satisfied, right? So we've done all this stuff on Earth, and now we look up to the stars, and we say we want to go there too. We want to get off this planet. We want to know what's out there, who's out there, are we alone? All these big questions. And so what we did was we did it. We put our minds to it, our collective minds to it. We sent satellites into space, and that wasn't good enough for us. After the satellites, we sent a dog. That wasn't good enough. After the dog, we sent a human. That wasn't good enough. And then President Kennedy had this idea. There's a saying that he wants to go to the moon by the end of the decade. And at the time, people were like, how is that possible? Can that be done? And yet we did it. So we put our minds to it. And on that night, around the world, I wasn't alive, but some people were alive. Around the world, they held their breath and they watched as the men went up into space. And then everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they landed on the moon. And that was a big achievement, but that achievement was about 50 years ago, right? And since then, it's kind of like the light went out on space exploration. People felt they had accomplished something, and then they just stopped. But recently, there's been more excitement around space exploration again. We're going back to the moon, We are looking at the stars again. We're looking at going to Mars eventually. Many nations have been to Mars now with their rovers and their landers and their cruisers. Everyone's on Mars. And now we're thinking bigger. We're thinking about, not just sending things to Mars, but sending people to Mars. And the question becomes, who's going to be the lucky few that get to mine the surface? We had to talk about mining the surface of Mars, exploring Mars, kind of living out the dreams of many, many people all around the world. Could it be someone in this audience? Possibly, because you're the right age, especially the young ones. You're the right age. The question becomes, thinking back, he said, that's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. And at the time, it was mostly men doing all of this explorations, maybe one or two countries doing the exploration. But when you think about it, everybody looks up into the night sky. Everybody sees the stars. Everybody has a desire to kind of get off this rock that we call our home and to live and breathe and play somewhere else. Even that explorer spirit is really deep within all of us. So the question then becomes, as everyone sitting in this room, we're all educators. How are we going to apply this quote? If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. How are we going to apply that to STEAM education and how we think about how we educate everyone, not just the very young, but some of us are not so young, but we all need an education in STEAM to get us to that next level. So one thing that comes to mind as a STEAM educator, and as an educator, we think a lot, we think up here a lot. We're always thinking about, this pedagogy, this approach, that approach, but oftentimes we need to think about the people that we're actually trying to educate. And so there's a Maori saying that says, the bird that feeds on the miro berry, theirs is the forest. The bird that feeds on the tree of knowledge, theirs is the world. So what we want to do is we want to educate students to explore the world, to be able to be successful in the world, to kind of wrangle the world. And to do that, we have to think about how they learn, not so much also what they learn, but how they learn, what they want to learn, what kind of approach is best for them. And then kind of take ourselves out of that equation and try to listen to their voices more often than we do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story as I'm talking through this. And these are some people I met in St. Petersburg, Russia. I used to live there, Kezia and Sabina, and they were Roma children. So they pretty much lived on the streets and lived in different encampments. And I would see them kind of every day as I was going about my business. And once in a while, I'd buy them ice cream and, we'd have a little chat. My Russian isn't that great. Their English is non-existent, but we could communicate. And the thing that this experience taught me was listening. So in a story, there are two participants in the story, right? There's a person that's telling the story, and then there's the person that's listening is also participating in the story. So when we're working with students and people, we need to really listen to them. Listen to, and design thing is called empathy. We need to listen to them, learn what they want, what they need, instead of having one size fits all approach to everything that we do. As educators, sometimes we do have resource constraints, but we also always have to think about who we're trying to help and what kind of approach best suits them. So we have to be flexible in our listening. After living in Russia, I went to Australia, and I met this cute little boy named Waru. He was an Aboriginal person, and in Kununurra, which is in Western Australia. And if you've ever been to Kununurra, to get there, it's a desolate, long, desolate, empty road. There's some wild birds. It's kind of like it feels like you're in a movie because there's literally nothing on the roads except these really long train trucks which are carrying frozen goods and supplies into these more desolate areas. And as I was going there, to do a program, I was thinking, wow, there's nothing here. What possibly could I be bringing tech-wise to this area? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I can bring something, it'll be a nice photo op, but then I'm going after 10 days, and what happens after? So it's a sustainability. piece, right? So it's not about being able to give something to someone and say you've given it. It's more about what can they do with what you've given them. So how are we making our program so that they stick with the people that we're helping? It's not a like charity where the world needs everyone to be involved in STEAM. It's not one or two countries. The whole world needs to be involved in this effort. So how do we establish programs that can help people in most desolate areas who don't have the same technology that we have or the same access to resources that we have? How do we get them involved in this effort? This is another moment coming back to Atlanta, and with Atlanta International School, had the distinct pleasure of launching an experiment, and many people are in the audience that were there. We launched this experiment to the International Space Station. And in every story, there's, whether it's, I don't know, Captain Picard has Starfleet, and Luke Skywalker has the Jedi, and even Shrek has Donkey. Everybody has partners, right? You don't go it alone, you go it with partners. So how, when we launched this experiment, we had partners. We had partners from research institutions. We had partners at NASA. We had partners in our parents. We had partners in our student body. So partnerships are very important. We're not going at it alone. We're going at it with our partners to help actually build, again, the sustainability and, again, the scaffolding to help make a successful program. And this is another experience I had. I also lived in South Korea. I lived in Okgae, South Korea, which is a small kind of farming village next to a fishing village on the extreme east coast of Korea, about 100 kilometers south of the DMZ. And this is a kind of a coal stove, a stove. I don't know what was inside it. I was afraid of it. I'm afraid of fire, so I don't like to light things. But there was a stove in the middle of the classroom. And it kind of struck me that I was in Korea, which is one of the most advanced technological countries in the world. And in the schoolhouse, they were using this coal or wood stove, some kind of stove. And just thinking that juxtaposition between the haves and the have-nots, even in the same area. All the kids had mobile phones. Everything was the latest and the greatest, but yet we had a smart board in the classroom, yet we still had this stove. And so for me, that also brought the idea of being innovative. You know, innovation isn't just about things that you can buy. Innovation is also about how you think, what you do with what you have. And maybe there was a reason why this was the best solution for that classroom. It did keep us really, really warm. That is true. We could also put a pot of a kettle on it and it would boil some water. But innovation is important to think, how are we changing what we're doing? Are we just doing the same things over and over again? Are we involving the same people over and over again? Are we solving the same problems over and over again? Are we taking Earth problems and then translating them into space? Or are we thinking outside of the box? Are we thinking about what can we do differently? How can we affect change? How can we, again, involve more people in this process? So I go back to the question. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So the important part to the story is that basically everybody on this planet has an opportunity to learn, to expand, to grow, and to maybe burst out of the shell that is Earth. And so how are we going to take everyone with us, not just the haves, but also those who don't have as much? So when we're devising programs and thinking about how to involve people or what kind of projects we're going to do, where we're going to go next, think about the ash tree. Think about the ash tree people who don't have, and think about, okay, if I sacrifice them, what am I sacrificing in the future? We're sacrificing divergent thought. We're sacrificing just more color and laughter and inclusion, and it's something we really should think about. And finally, I'm going to conclude with this quote by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And it's true. We made it a mindset to, as humans, to go across oceans, to go across poles, to go deep into the sea, and finally now the final frontier right now is to go to other planets to establish a human footprint there. So are we going to do the right thing or are we going to do the wrong thing? And in all the Hollywood movies, the hero gets the prize. So I like to think that in our movie, we will do the right thing and we will get the prize and we will carry as many people as we can with us. Thank you.